Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Margot Leitman, who is an amazing storyteller, speaker, author of Long Story Short, and an well, you cannot be an ex-comedy, ex-stand-up artist when you become one. So, Margot, I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you for joining me for this interview.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Margot is an amazing author. If you haven't checked out her book, Long Story Short, yet, please do, because it's great. And Margot, we're here today to discuss storytelling, so that, to provide some more insights for my Russian community.
Sure.
And for starters, could you tell me your story? How did you end up in business storytelling after starting in the stand-up? How did it?
I'm in both areas of storytelling in the sense that I do a lot of live performance storytelling, and then I do a lot of storytelling in business. So basically, I started with stand-up comedy, and then from that, I evolved into telling stories in my stand-up shows, and then eventually started a storytelling show. Oh. And then from that, I started teaching storytelling, and not at a corporate level, more for theater companies. And then companies started approaching me. Strangely, it would be that a CEO at a company, for example, would just be out and see me perform live and think, wow, this would be interesting to bring to my company. That's how it all started, just from my live performing. And so then my corporate business started to build, and then I wrote some books on the subject, and then evolved into public speaking. So it's been kind of like about a 10, 11-year journey that started with stand-up comedy, to storytelling, to teaching, to corporate storytelling, to books, to public speaking at corporations. So it's an interesting path. Yeah, and it's been a long journey. Yeah.
Yeah, great. It's so great to hear that this lively part of storytelling is happening in business, because I see a lot of more like analytical storytellers, yes, like guys with big brains and stuff. But you're more like a blowtorch, like flaming something in
yes,
this world. This is amazing.
Theater background, not a business background. And so that's what my training is, and that's what my college degree is in. And so I approach it in a different way than a business person does, but it's shocking to me how much overlap there is. And I didn't even intend for that to be that way, but there is. Yeah.
Okay, this background is great. It suits you very well. I have a question. Considering your background, some people have like Mike Adams, who I've interviewed recently.
Yeah.
He is like a sales background, a huge experience, and he obviously teaches salespeople. How do you position yourself, or is it more like a vehicle agnostic tool in your touch, the storytelling? I mean,
well, I don't ask for a specific type of person at the company. I've had a couple different ways. There's one that's like a business will hire me for 6 to 8 weeks to do a full-length class. Is that my husband that just walked in?
That's okay. That's fine.
Okay. He's putting my dog in here, who's now going to interrupt the whole interview. 5 pounds of a big presence. Anyway, my dog. So there's certain companies that will bring and hire me for 6 to 8 weeks, and that's a full-length class. And I've had anything from the head of the company in that class to the newest hire that's right out of college. And sometimes they'll be in the same class, and it's usually about 10 to 12 people. And we will meet for 6 to 8 weeks for 3 hours a session. And then at the end, this company will put on a storytelling show and a performance. Yeah, so I've had that happen at a number of different types of companies, and had everywhere in there, because the way that they look at it is, we all need to know the fundamentals of how to tell a story. And once we know that, we can apply that to whatever we're doing, whether it's running the company or bringing in new clients or dealing with the customers. But they want the foundation. So for me, it's in college, when I was a theater major and I wanted to study modern dance, right? And I wanted to learn that style. But they said, you have to take years of ballet first to understand the foundation of dance before you can move to that and do it, interpret it your way. And I really bucked up against it and thought, oh, this is dumb. This isn't the type of dance I do. But then once I I understood it was the foundation of everything, and it made everything easier. So it's kind of the same thing. You understand the story, the root of how to properly tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end and an arc, then you can apply that to whatever you do. I don't go in there and say, this is how you can change your brand. I go in there and say, this is how you tell a story. And then their brand evolves. So that's one way that offices hire me. And that's my favorite thing to do. And one office even rented out a comedy club and they performed there with cocktails and things. This office, I guess they had the budget for it, but it was so fun. But often I'll just do a keynote at a company as well, is a thing that I've been doing very frequently lately. And this year especially, it's been very busy in that department. A keynote about the power of storytelling, however tailored to what this company does.
Great.
Yeah.
You know, I love this culture, this American culture of keynotes and speeches, because we are only developing in this area, and the things you're telling me is that I hear that the culture understands the value of storytelling, and this is amazing to hear, because I face this problem every day. Like I go out to a person and say, like, he asked me, what do you do? And I go, like, business storytelling. And he's like, what, retail? Like, he thinks there is a connection. So I need to solve a specific problem, and this is a pain, you know. So I'm really glad to hear that you don't have it, and it's an insight for me, because I think that we are moving towards it here in Russia.
Well, what's cool is that because I come from the creative world, that the type of storytellers that I used to interact with were all in my world. And now sometimes I hate the internet and sometimes it's the most annoying thing in the world, but I will say it's pretty awesome, because now where I'm at in my career, I'm starting to link up with a lot of business storytellers via internet and LinkedIn. I don't know if you have that website in
we do, it's blocked.
Okay, so we won't be friends on there. But via or my book and such, I'm starting to connect so much with the business storytelling world and the people in it. And what I'm realizing is it's a pretty fun group of people, and it's a pretty unified group of people that all have the interest in story, whether it's at business or in the creative space. So via online, I'm starting to connect a lot with people in the business storytelling world, and it's great. Yeah.
Great. So just a short question, just up on the notch. After connecting with those business folks, like, what difference do you see in their point of view and your point of view? Like, is there any like something they can give you and give back?
I think there's two things. It's the refusal. I get bucked up against on the refusal to be vulnerable in the business world. That it's always, we must lead with being the most powerful company, or the head of the thing, or the best businessman, or whatever that may be. And there's no acknowledgement of how you got there, or mistakes you made, or how the company failed before it succeeded, etc. So there's a lot of refusal to be vulnerable, instead of just, people want to get up there and say, we are the leading brand in this, and we have the numbers to prove it, and da da da. And people don't attach to that. What they attach to is a rise to that. And so the hurdles along the way to get there, So that's a big thing that I work with business people a lot, is being comfortable with being a little bit vulnerable in the way that you speak about what you do, and showing the ups and downs of that. You think a lot about people's stories. A lot of Steve Jobs' story is that he was fired for a bit from, that's included that in his story. And that's part of the charm of his legend, right? So that's true. Yeah, but a lot of people don't put anything like that out there. So that's what I'm saying. So that's my big thing, is that the vulnerability. Business people, I have found I have to work with them, and then once they get there, it's great. The other thing, is just the thought of refusing to say anything about themselves. They just say, I want to talk about what we do here at the company. Know anything about you specifically. And I always think, well, you are your company. You are. Are. Why do you work here? What drew you to this? What was it about this that you as a person, it meant something to you to work here? And even if you're not the head of it, why are you here? And what is important? And then talking about that. So I think that that's a big thing as well. Great.
Thank you for those insights. This is great. I love the vulnerability part, because it's really essential.
Yeah.
Margaret, can you tell me about like maybe the first time, or maybe like the most major event when you felt that storytelling is a really impactful tool to create business results, like maybe a project of some sort, or just an event or a person you've trained?
My goodness. Well, I get thank you letters a lot
Mm-hmm.
from people I worked with in the business world saying, I did a presentation, my first presentation since your class, and it completely changed the way I spoke, and my results were completely different. I get that a lot because I think that the way it impacts is that I, I think usually before, this has been my experience, before I come into a company, often they make a presentation with slides. So you have
Yeah.
point slides, facts, numbers, and zero personality. And they stand there and they do it and they go, oh, why didn't I acquire this client at the end of it? Or why
Yeah.
did this go? And they're like, I gave them all the facts and the numbers and no one responded. So I think it's that. Then I get notes saying, actually, after I took the, thank you letters that say, after your work, you came to the company, I decided to try to not rely on, I believe PowerPoint can be a crutch to rely on, and they said, I decided not to do it. I decided to speak more from the heart. I decided to not have pages and pages of notes in front of me, but just index cards with bullet points, and spoke more freely. And I acquired that client, or I got the results, or I closed the deal. I mean, I see that happen a lot. So I think it's more a matter of they take this class and they re-examine. For me, it's really rewarding that they re-examine the way they were presenting and realizing that this fact-based presentation without any of their own personality in them is not what's going to work. What's going to work is someone saying, I want to work with you, and you
Mm-hmm.
work who I want to work with, and you are the company. So when I get those notes of how someone presents after the course, I think that to me is when I started realizing this is really impacting brands. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's just refreshing to hear that from someone else. Just the results you get. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Margot, I know that you have a set of like rules. I've heard them on the podcast recently. I know that storytelling is an art, and more or less an art. So, but I really love that part when you said that the hero is someone you must be rooting for, because it really resonates with me. Like the Aristotle, he has the structure like pity, fear, and catharsis for the hero. This
Yeah.
emotion that we have, and this is really resonating with me.
Pity,
And
fear, and catharsis, you said? Yeah. I'm just writing
yeah,
it
it's
down.
oh, nice. That's nice. I heard it like a couple of years ago on a TED talk on a guy who is a literature critic. He was talking about how it's hard to be a critic. So he shared with structure, and this, like rooting for comes from first having pity, then having fear if the hero can overcome this situation or not, and then catharsis when he does. So this is really resonating with me. And could you share maybe with my audience some rules that you have for storytelling? Maybe not all of them, just to keep the
I
cards
have
in the
so
end.
many. And it's interesting because I get asked this a lot, and then I teach a lot of courses in storytelling.
Yeah.
And then so my answers are always ever evolving based on what I've just taught or what I've learned from the class, because I learn a lot with every class I teach. But for me, these are the ones that are on my mind right now.
Okay.
Say, keep it true.
Mm-hmm.
Story. And so many people want to fabricate their story in order to make it more interesting. And what happens is the audience knows you're lying, and then your audience turns on you, turns against you. So that's a big one.
Yeah.
People think, and it comes from a fear of, I am not interesting enough. My story isn't valid. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to let that go and keep it true. That's a big one.
True.
Something that I really feel strongly about is that you have to be over whatever it is that you are presenting as your story in a public setting. You cannot be knee deep in this situation. You have to be over it and be able to have processed it.
Mm.
Because what happens is when a person tells a story about something, for example, I've seen this, a person just got diagnosed with cancer that week, and then they came on stage to talk about that. It's not going to work. You're going to start breaking down and crying. And when you do that, your audience feels uncomfortable. So it doesn't really, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and that doesn't mean you can't someday tell this story about having cancer. And I've seen people tell stories about having cancer many years later. My
Yeah.
friend Nick Ross is a good friend and colleague of mine. Nick is about, I think, 10 years away from it. And he's been telling stories about it for a while now since it's been over. And he tells it wonderfully. But you can't tell
Wow.
the week it's happened. So that's a big one I see, is that people tell stories that are not processed. Yeah.
I was thinking, does it apply to business? Like, if we are having a change in culture or some kind of business process, and you start telling the story about the things that's happening, do you think it's true for the business world, like business stories?
Yes and no, because is it working?
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Depends.
Like, is this change getting like show? I don't want to hear a story about how you're changing your business and let's hope for the best. I want to, if I were to hear the story of like you're changing your business and this is what we're seeing as a result of the change, even if you have a little bit of ending for, I think the thing I'm trying to say is an audience wants closure.
Yeah.
And if it's open ended, like these are the changes we'll make, and at the end of the presentation, you go, let's see how it goes. I don't know.
No, yeah.
No. And that feels uneasy to me. It's like, these are the changes we make. And already, even ending it with saying already our numbers are up 3% or something like that, that's great. But there needs to be some sort of closure for me at the end of a story. Not, I just got sick. I hope I'll be okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
So again, like we've just made these changes, we'll see how it goes, or we're making these changes for you, and this is how we see it going. And already this has happened with this one client, and we're on our way. I think that would be enough for me.
Yeah, that really makes a different impression, different feeling. Great. Any more rules?
Yeah. Big one is uh if you're telling something that's funny, you need to add a little depth in it. It can't all just be fluffy. And if you're telling something that's very serious, I think you have to add a little humor here and there. It has to have your story presentation, anything needs to have more than one level, more than one feeling in it. So you don't want it to all be so serious or all be so light. It should have what I say peaks and valleys in it. And then I would say that I always say, we get it. Don't be so preachy about everything. Don't like hit us so hard over the head. I think it's like we're always 10 steps ahead of you. And sometimes it's insulting to the audience to have something so heavy-handedly, repeated, or the message over and over and over and over again. Sometimes an audience may listen to something and take something else from that, and let the audience feel that rather than telling the audience how to feel. It's a big one too.
Yeah, and I've heard this thesis from you on the podcast like a week ago, and what ticks me here is that the business world is always makes always obligatory the moral part, like you need to make this influence, you need to make them think this way, you need to sell, you need to influence and stuff like this. But this is, I guess, the art form. Like you can switch to more freedom or less freedom depending on your goal, I guess.
But I don't know. I think often when I first moved to this city and I had to get a mattress, and I went to these mattress stores, there's this street in California that's like all of the mattress stores are on there to buy a mattress. And I went in one, and this man was so aggressive about like how I had to buy it and why I need to buy this one, and these are the facts, and these are the numbers, and are you ready to do the sale? And it was so much for me that I left.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to this other mattress store, and the guy, I was like, well, what about this? And he was like, well, here's what you need to know. And then he walked away and let me like think about it. And then I said, okay, I'm going to buy this one. And I always think about that in business. It's like, I wasn't being told I had to do something or that these were the facts, so therefore it's this. It was like, he gave me the facts and then he let me think about it. And it was a big expensive purchase I was making, but because I was able to think about it and come to my own conclusion, to be honest, it was probably the same mattress in both stores,
Yes.
But I'm sure there was no difference, right?
It was
Oh,
definitely.
I'm sure it was the exact same one. But it was a matter of the way that he approached it was, here are my
Uh-huh.
facts. Now you can come to your own conclusion and think about this. And the other guy was like, here are my facts, and here I'm going to force this down your throat. And it was, to me, it was very off-putting.
Yeah. It just a thought. I totally agree with that. You don't have to. Don't need to be pushy. And even if you do, like this situation that you're telling me, it's a story, by the way. I love that the both sales guys, they know that their intention was to sell, and you know it, and they know it. So basically, what I'm hearing right now is. If you show your intention and it's in the good for the people that you're talking to, you don't need to show it like show it down the throat. So just show it and just leave it be, like this.
Yeah, and let people process it.
Yeah.
Because what I don't like is at the end of something, people always tell me how to feel at the end of something. You should feel this, or this is what I'm trying. And I often say, well, I wasn't feeling that. I was feeling something, but it was different than what you're saying. And now you're
Yeah.
forcing me to have a feeling that's insincere, you know?
True.
What?
You know,
Yeah.
I had a similar case. I was working in a company which had four values, and there was a trainer who just went on to discuss with the audience whether this like video or a flick on YouTube matches each any of those values. And there's like 20 people in the room, and one guy goes, "This it's the first value," and the second guy, "It's the second value," and then in the end she says like, "No, no, no, yes, no, no, it's the third value." And I'm like, "Oh my God, you've just killed the most of them." Like,
Wow.
and it was such an off put for me. I just remembered it because it's resonating, and you gave me the answer why it resonated so
Wow,
much.
that doesn't sound like a good experience at all.
Yeah.
Because if you ever watch a movie with a friend and then you ask, well, what do you think that was about? You know, or what do you think they were trying to say in that? And then you're probably going to say something completely different than your friend says. But you're both in
Yeah.
the same movie, but the movie's not telling you at the end, make sure to feel this. They're letting it sit, you know? So I think we
Yeah.
can learn a lot in business from art. You
Yeah.
know, that's basically where I am coming from, is that there's a lot of principles in art that, like, art lets you stand and feel on its own, and we can learn from that in the business world as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any more rules, or is like the major ones?
I think I said it all.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Great.
I mean,
Great.
there's
And
others. I could go on forever, but I think I'll leave it.
yeah, just it's good to have like a set. It's I was just discussing with Mike Bosworth and Mike Adams. They have like different sales stories and different numbers of them. Mike Bosworth has 3, Mike Adams has 7, and Paul Smith has 25. And I was like asking, why not less or more for each one of them? And I loved answers of all of them, but Mike Bosworth was like the best. Like, if you teach salespeople, you have to be simple.
Yeah.
3 is more simple. So
Yes.
it's just,
It is.
it's
3 is
thank
good.
you. Thank you for sharing like the most essential ones.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question about one of your podcasts. You said that to
Which
find the great.
podcast are you? Is it an interview I did?
I guess just give me a second. I'll check the name because I was watching it on YouTube, so it should
Oh,
be in
it
my
was probably
history.
Schmoyer. Was it?
Uh just give me a sec. It was video creators.
Yeah, that's Tim
Like,
Schmoyer.
yeah, yeah. That's
So
he's
wonderful.
he's a great guy. Yeah, I loved
I'm
it.
such a fan. Yes, such a fan. Yeah.
I loved it. You said in this interview that to find a great story, you need to care about the events you're talking about. So, could you comment on that? How does it work out?
Meaning that even if it's a tiny, small incident, but if it drastically impacted you, it's worth telling that story.
Hmm.
So people really limit themselves in what they can tell stories about. They think they can only tell a story about the day their brother died, for example, and that's the only story they'll tell in a stage setting because it's a big story, and they think. But You could have a really impactful story about a day you went to the supermarket, if something really affected you in that day. That's worth telling. So
Hmm.
it's less about how big the event is and boil it down to, did I care about what happened? And how much did
Hmm.
I care about this? And therefore, my favorite stories are the really small stories that drastically impact you. I think they're really,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay, great. So small stories that have an impact. Great.
Right. So, for example, I just had a student in a class who worked at a restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And the story that he worked on, it was so funny, just about this table that asked for avocado on their burger, and and it was on the burger, but she said it wasn't. And he kind of like had this argument with her. The whole thing, it was such a small story. And it was like one of the funniest stories I've ever heard in my life. And it was only about him dealing with this customer at the table over this burger. And he cared so much and got like so worked up about it and was so upset about it that it was, I mean, and I'm sure this person has been through much bigger things in their life, obviously, but it impacted him so much that it was worth telling. And it was an incredibly successful story. He did it in a performance, and it was wonderful. And it was also a work-related story. You know, it was about his job. So thinking about it in those terms, yeah, they're my favorites.
Great. Great. You know, you've actually reminded me of a short stand-up routine. A guy, an African American guy, I don't remember his name. He
Yeah.
was just telling about how he and his girlfriend went to a supermarket and he saw apple juice and it was like off-price sale and he boarded like 6 gallons of it, like whole pack, and there's no more juice left in the store. And he's like standing there shining with this juice, and there's this old man behind him who goes like, and he's like, he got also worked up about it, and he's like, he starts commenting like, if you're having a problem that I'm buying all this apple juice, you can go like to another store, man. I don't care. I will buy all the juice in this country if it's on sale. And he just goes on a ramble, and as he goes on it, he sees the surprise on this man's face and understands that probably this man was upset not about the apple juice, but because he's African American and his girlfriend is white. But for a second, he was living in a world with no racism, just apple juice. And I got just blown away. I was laughing so hard at this.
Right, because it's kind of like I love stories that sneak in something bigger while telling something small, you know,
Yeah,
because a lot of small stories can actually be about something much bigger than what you're telling about, but that small story is an example of it. And it's so much more effective to tell a story about apple juice to show a story about racism than to tell a story that's all about racism, because your audience is actually going to be tricked into listening and they'll hear you even more in that way, you know?
true,
So it's great.
true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Margot, I have two more questions just that I ask all storytellers I come across. And the first one would be, what would be your advice to someone who is just beginning their storytelling skills development, like in the beginning of the way?
Developing it in as a career to be a storyteller, or just developing
No,
it
just he's trying to be like to he's trying to tell stories, like he's learning this stuff. You're like he's the first time
right.
in your class. What would be
I
your
would say
advice?
your story is interesting enough. Do not be scared that you are not interesting. You are interesting. Everyone has a story. Don't
Great,
question that. Yeah.
great. That's reassuring. Thank you. And the second one, imagine there is a phrase. It takes one thing to get from good story to great story, and this one thing is
Perspective.
perspective.
Yes. So what I mean is how you feel about what happened, your point of view of what happened. I always have people, you know, I'll give a class the same phrase and I'll have everyone answer it with their own feeling about it. So the one I give in a class will be, I was hot and thirsty, and the person next to me offered me a sip of their water, and I thought, what would you say?
Do you want some?
No,
Like,
I was hot and thirsty, and the person next to me offered me a sip of their water, and I thought,
oh, thank you. Like,
And would you drink it?
oh yeah, yeah, of course.
So you drink the stranger's water.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. That's
Right.
the trick
So,
question.
so I go around the room with 10 people and have everyone answer it. And some people will, like you, and say thank you, and they'll drink it. And some people will say, oh my gosh, I don't want to get germs, because if I get germs, I'm going to get sick. And if I get sick, I'm going to be in bed for a week. And then I'm going to miss work for a week. And they don't pay, my job doesn't pay me for time off. And then I can't pay my rent. And they go to this whole place from just the water, right? And some people just say thank you and they drink it. And some people think, did they put some pills in it? Are they trying to poison me? But the point is that everyone's having the same prompt, right? But it's the
Yeah.
way a person feels that makes that story. Everyone's getting offered the same water. The facts of the story are being the same. I'm hot and thirsty, and this person offers me water. There's nothing interesting about that. And everyone's telling that same story. But what makes the story great is how you feel about this person offering you water. So for you, I think you're an optimist. And I think
Okay.
and then there's people that are skeptics, which makes that story a different story. And that's their perspective. And then there's people that are paranoid, which makes that story interesting. And then there's people that are germaphobes, and that's interesting in that way. And so it shows all these different ways that every person can tell the same story. The facts of the story remain the same, but every person's perspective makes that story fascinating. So
Great.
so that's what I'm saying is, I'm not so interested in the facts of your story. I'm really interested in what was going on in your head. I'm really interested in how you felt. So going back to your story about this apple juice, all that took place in his head,
Yeah.
This is how he felt. That's his perspective. That's what made that story great. Or it's the story without perspective is I went to the supermarket, I bought a bunch of apple juice on sale, and the person in front of me gave me a weird look. That's the story, right?
Yeah, basically that's it. Great. That resonates with me on so many levels, because I've heard something like this from Doug Stevenson, if you know him, this guy, and he's like his story theater method. And the things you're telling about is there is more value to your perspective than the story itself, and this is amazing. This is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I really, really believe that's what makes a story great, is how you feel. And it's what makes a story funny.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, Margot.
Yes.
I know that you have one book on storytelling, but that's not it. And I'm about to ask you about the book that's upcoming. Could you tell me a bit, like a glimpse, because I know.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So
I just got my first advanced copy, so it doesn't come out until August. But I have the only copy of it.
So am I like the first one to see it? Like,
yes, look, it's the same illustrator, who's Joyce Wang, who's incredibly talented illustrator.
Nice.
And so she's done all of the art in both. And so this is Long Story Short, which is my book about how to tell a story. It's a storytelling guide. And then this is What's Your Story, which you can do. It's available for pre-order now, and it comes out in August. So if you order it now, it'll come in your mailbox the day it comes out. But this one has, yes, some of my, words to live by, but also there are prompts in here, guided prompts for you to write stories and how to generate stories. There's also anything in here that has a little briefcase mark. That means it's geared specifically for business. So there are a lot of, because what happened with this book is that I didn't intend for businesses to start. I didn't intend for this book to be used in business as much as it is, but it took off in the business world so much that I thought I would be considerate of that, such a big part of my audience, to have things that are specifically geared for the business world in this book, in addition to the creative world as well. So
great. I'm so happy to see that you're progressing. This is amazing, and it's a great opportunity for everyone. Guys, you know what to do. There's an Amazon link there. It will be in the description of the video. So thank you for sharing with me. Margot, like, just one final thought. Could you give some wish for all the people that are watching us in Russia, like something that they can inspire from to develop their storytelling skills?
What should be inspirational for them to develop their skills is that if you have an experience that you think is story worthy, write some notes down initially about the experience, just details that you can remember. And then when you're ready to tell that story, you'll have those details there, and you can go back and tell it fully with these really funny things that you would have forgotten otherwise. But for me, always have a notebook and pen with you at all times, because stories happen no matter where you go. And if you don't have that with you, you could forget it. There's a lot going on in the world. So notebook, pen, keep it small. This is mine. It's like in my pocket at all times, and write it down, and you never know when you're going to use it.
Okay, great. Margot, that's a great advice, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Wish you all the great stories to come in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.